Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you all about the latest from Anaal Nathrakh, Endarkenment, out October 2nd on Metal Blade Records. This album has 10 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the band's 11th full-length studio album. This album is really interesting. When you look at the title, when you look at the content of the record, everything is interconnected. This is an album about darkness, about endarkment. We've moved from an age of enlightenment to an age of endarkment, and that is definitely represented across all 10 songs on this album, not only from a lyrical perspective, but also from the way the songs are constructed, the way they sound, and the way the vocal approaches are across all 10 tracks. When you start listening to the record, you immediately realize how dynamic this album is, how fluid it is. All 10 songs, very different. Different in construction, different in approach, and different how they're put together and the internal dynamic mechanisms that they have. This is not an album that offers you a path, and it's a path that it's easy to travel upon. This is a record that is not a roller coaster ride either. This is not an album that gives you peaks and valleys as you go through the songs. Those peaks and valleys are built within the tracks themselves, not in the overall structure of the record. Really interesting and really great way of putting an album together and still making it very fluid and very dynamic. I love that. When you take a step back and you look at the record, you see an Anaal Nathrakh album. Pure, brutal, uncompromising from beginning all the way to the end. When you start listening to the tracks, you start to see the dynamic changes within the tracks. You start to see the peaks and valleys, the more melodic portions of the songs, those wastelands of atmosphere before you get into the brutality, or vice versa. And I love that. So you have the dynamic mechanisms built within the tracks themselves. The peaks and valleys are built within the tracks themselves. And then you have this overall record that is just very cohesive, just very substantial, that has a huge wall of sound and volume coming at you from the first song all the way to the last song. Now, the sound allows it to be that way as well. The sound is the perfect partner to that structure. This is a brutal record as far as sound is concerned. I felt that it came very together. You don't really feel the elements of the sound, either be the guitars, the bass, the more orchestrational elements, or the drums breaking apart one from the other and kind of coming in whenever they need to come in. They're a very cohesive force. All the elements are together, they're all united, they're all pulling in the same direction, and that makes the overall album have this really huge volume, this huge wall of sound to be very heavy, very brutal, very dynamic, and almost demolishing at times, which is exactly what I was expecting from this record. Perhaps what I wasn't expecting from this record was the vocals to play a very interesting role in changing a little bit of that heaviness. There are also musical melodic elements that are introduced in certain portions of the record. They use them predominantly more in the choruses. That is true, they're there. But I felt that those were more undertones. Those melodic guitar riffs tend to be more undertones that just create a very thin layer within the overall layers that the songs have. The vocals to me was the most interesting element of the record because it's the one that really offers the biggest change, the biggest fluctuation that you're going to get on this album as far as peaks and valleys are concerned. You're obviously going to get predominantly guttural, harsh vocals throughout the record, but the range of vocals is outstanding. Screaming vocals, harsh vocals, guttural vocals, clean vocals, almost operatic symphonic style vocals. Everything is coming at you in this album, and everything is coming at you with a purpose. Not just being heavy for the sake of being heavy, not just adding melody for the sake of adding melody. I actually felt that the clean vocals added a cinematic, at times symphonic element to the album that really stripped away or tried to strip away some of the heaviness without being able to do so. So what you end up with is a horror style cinematic approach. So you have a very brutal album with very brutal songs, but at times those songs almost become beautiful in its brutality, and that it's due to the clean vocals and how some of those melodic undertones matching those clean vocals create that different atmosphere, create a much different ambiance without breaking away from the overall feel and sound that the record have. The two just are able to coexist. One does not take anything away from the other. This is still a brutal album through and through. It just has a more beautiful way of showing you that brutality, and that beautiful way is through those clean vocals. Like I said, almost operatic, almost symphonic at times with some of those melodic undertones. Overall, I love this album. I love the construction of the album. I love how it's put together. perhaps the band's best album as far as being well defined in its sound and the way it's recorded and the music and in the vocals. When you put all of these elements together, this really creates a very cohesive, a very concise album that doesn't have any soft spots, and it's really strong from top to bottom in its creation and the way it's delivered to the listener. I love this record, and for the fans of the band, I don't think anybody's going to walk away disappointed from how the album sounds, from how the album feels, and how all of these elements are intertwined to really create a strong sounding record top to bottom. As far as tracks are concerned, I want to start off with Libidinous. Libidinous is a great track. It's driven, has a very driven sound, but it also has a very dark melodic undertone to it, one of those undertones that I mentioned. It's not necessarily in the forefront, it's really just a layer within the track itself. It has dynamic vocal changes and layers to it. I really like the layers on the vocals. It adds a sense of bigger volume. It adds a sense of presence. It really spreads the vocals a lot wider, but not losing any of the heaviness that they carry. So I like that approach on this track. The verses, pre-chorus and chorus, they all have different dynamics. This is a song that feels like there is an evolution, there's a progression as the song moves along, starting with the verses, moving into the pre-chorus, and then finally the chorus. The chorus is definitely more melodic, not only from a vocal perspective, but also from a musical perspective. The clean vocals add to that melody, but it's a very somber, it's a very dark, like I said, cinematic style melody that really plays well with the overall heaviness that this track has. Amazing song, how it's put together, how it's delivered, and that crescendo, that growth that it has across all the different elements is definitely a winning formula. Next, Feeding the Death Machine, heavy and fast, brutal vocals on this track. They add the perfect balance to the way the sound comes together. They just add a lot of substance to the overall experience of the track. Relentless and destructive. That's pretty much how this song feels. That's how it comes across. The chorus remains driven and heavy, perhaps a little bit more melodic because you have clean vocals, adding that operatic feel and that operatic atmosphere, cinematic at times, to the way the chorus is coming along. But it doesn't really take anything away from the overall heaviness and the overall impetuousness that this song has and how it's put together. I feel like there's a slight drop perhaps on the heaviness side, but as far as the tempo of the song, as far as the movement of the song, it just continues to go. It just continues at a very high tempo, at a very high pace, and I love that dynamic because there's not almost a musical break between the verses and the chorus. The break comes more on a vocal side and on an atmosphere that results from that vocal change. This song also has an incredible solo that really pulls out of these two worlds. It stays on path with how the song is moving, but it adds a little bit of melody, but it's a dark melody and becomes a lot darker as the solo progresses. I love it. I think it really adds energy and it adds life to the overall experience of this song. Last but not least, Create Art, Though the World May Perish. Really interesting title. It really seems like that is the world that we're living in, where we're creating art, but the world may be perishing around us. And specifically with the music business, the way things are going with no shows, no concerts, this song kind of resonates with that experience, with that world that a lot of us are living in. It's a very powerful track. It has a very dark presence, specifically in the verses. It shows it a little bit in the chorus of that darkness, but it's definitely more present in the chorus. The clean vocals really infuse some light in the chorus. It really changes a little bit of the eyesight for the listener. It gives you a different perspective on what this song can offer you. There's definitely a clear shift from the verses to the chorus. They didn't try to keep them together as they did in Feeding the Death Machine. That one, the change was more atmospheric because the vocals created a different atmosphere. And this one, there's a clear thought process in wanting to break the verses from the chorus, wanting to have two worlds apart, and they did that. That is really, it's really noticeable to the listener as you transport yourself through this song. These changes allow the song to be a lot more dynamic. It's not as linear of a track, it's not as cohesive as a track. It's more of a roller coaster ride built in within the song itself, and the way it's coming at you with heaviness, more melody, heaviness, more melody. And I like that. It's a song that has two faces, two sides, and almost two different approaches all the way through. Very interesting track, a very magnetizing track, and a track that keeps you on your toes because it's constantly moving, constantly shifting. this is it. This is Anaal Nathrakh with Endarkenment, out October 2nd on Metal Blade Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.